tell me how you first got involved and started collaborating with Stanley. It was on Barry Lyndon, correct?
It was actually part of Clockwork, funnily enough, to the last couple of months I did as an assistant. I replaced a member of the crew, and we got on pretty well. And then, when when Barry Lyndon came along, I was asked by him and the DP to join them on that one, and it didn't stop from there, really.
Mm. But I'm sure that you had some kind of preconceived notions about what to expect from Kubrick, because he had just come off of 2001, which was this legendary film. How did he say?
I think really, when you're in the role of a sort of lesser minor in terms of authority, you just get on with it and do your job.
Right.
Who's directing it? It's always nice to be attached to a name like him, but it was just a privilege to be there, I suppose, really. But it was just doing my job, so I never really got in. I never got to understand the methodology or the style or technique or whatever he does. Mm-hmm. It was all, although it was historic. It didn't make a difference to me. I'd done loads of movies as an assistant cameraman. I think the people, like the camera, the DP itself at the time, John Alcott, probably had more wires on his plate than I did. You know what I mean?
Right.
Although, of course, Bowden was very innovative in that he used, and still are, the fastest lenses ever used on a film set to photograph the candlelight sequences. So I was very much involved with that. So it was a big learning process for me to come out of that and be able to be involved with such a beautiful product as Barry Lyndon,
Very much, yeah.
I'm usually get on with it. I'm saying later roles with The Shining, where I became more involved with the second unit photography, although it was taken on originally as the assistant DP, and then finished the last sort of 7 weeks doing the principal photography. So then soon after that, of course, Metal Jacket came, because he made films every 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. I was asked to DP on the show, his classic Vietnam epic, Full Metal Jacket. So that's basically a potted sort of basic idea. I did them, yes. And also, I was freelance, so it's always good to be asked to do anything. And something as interesting, and with lots of directors I worked with as an assistant, it was great to cap my sort of career in that area with working for him,
Yeah.
I'd go back any time. He was still alive today and work for him.
Well, what made him unique among the directors that you have collaborated with?
Well, I think he is really. Do you want to know more about me or about Kubrick? Because I'm not that interesting, really. I am in now, but you see, when you talk about Stanley, what can you say that's not already been said? I'm sure you've heard a lot of it, but I read a lot of crazy stories that continue to recycle. It seems the general picture is that he's a recluse surrounded by high walls and computers, who wears a football helmet while driving at 30 miles an hour. But what irritates him most, that he was a mindless sort of perfectionist who shoots 100 takes because performers didn't know their lines. Now, you've probably heard all this, right?
Yes, yeah.
This is the thing that I heard before going in to work for him, you see. So you think he's a bit batty, really, eccentric. But when you get to work with him, I was asked to give a sort of speech at the Academy in a tribute to Stanley for Full Metal Jacket at the British Film Institute a couple of years ago. And in it, I mentioned, if I can quote you some things I said, can I?
Please.
Well, I said the environment on Full Metal Jacket, while not real, evoked a mood of war. And he's not alone in that belief. Others felt the confusion and sense of hopelessness. It was part of Stanley's, Kubrick's plan, his intention, what he imagined the film to be, creating an environment that would mold his actors into the form he had imagined in a war zone, like Born to Kill, aggression on one hand and altruism on the other. So it wasn't not necessarily they're not knowing their lines, more, that's the actors, that is, more the interpretation, meaning behind the words. Mm-hmm. And I suppose I saw that much more after working with him than I well, now than I did then. I wish I had, actually, because I do see much more now about him since he's been away and gone than I saw then. And that's the thing, you're so close to somebody. You know, I had the privilege of experiencing 3 of his films, maybe 4 partly, working as an AC, a cameraman later, and director of photography. And after, I suppose, 50 years I've been in camera, or near 100 movies more, they were the 3 that I'm most proud. I think really Barry Lyndon, The Shining, and Full Metal Jacket.
Mm-hmm. You know what surprises me, though, and all the conversations that we've had about his working methods and the long takes and all of that, is that when people lead that charge against him, it's usually in saying what you just did, that the actors didn't know their lines and blah blah blah. But what surprised me about it, for someone that's known as so controlling with the actors, a lot of the actors that I've spoken to that worked for him say that there was incredible freedom that they were exploring, and a lot of times when they'd do that number of takes, they were able to try different things.
Yeah, that's true to some extent too. Yes. I mean, I don't think Jack needed to. I mean, Jack would always just do the first take wouldn't be any different to 20 takes or 30 takes. They'd all be perfect. Each one would be no different. And I think if you let Jack loose, he might come up with something, quite different that would lend itself to his integral part of something maybe he hadn't thought of at times, Stanley, that is, and because when you're sort of scripting a film like The Shining, which really rides its strength, it rode on the back of a best-selling novel, and which was, I thought, a fantastic book. He deviates completely away from the original Stephen King object, and the story becomes something that Stanley's, really. And in many ways, it's improved. Some people, it distracts from it. Other people say, again, when Stephen King went on to make The Shining himself, it didn't really score any points, did it, really? It's still The Shining, the original Kubrick, is a classic. So he has that ability to pull something out of a script like Clockwork. You ever read Clockwork Orange? What he did with that movie was magic. I think it's one of the best films he's ever done. And after Clockwork, of course, he up to that point, I think, in many ways, applied himself more. On Clockwork made him, I suppose, incredibly, because the whole thing was brilliant, I thought. It made him incredibly, apart from rich, almost powerful as well with Warner. So the next job, he could take as long and do what he liked. And I think you let go a little bit of the application. You don't apply yourself so much in the directing department, because you have a name now and of course, amazing skill. So you're seeking something new, and every film he did was quite different, really. He didn't sort of stick to one genre. I'm very surprised he did a second war film, because After Palms of Glory, which took some beating. It's still a classic, and always has been. And I think Full Metal is, I mean, what I learned from Stanley is what a photographer is or does really, and he told me that it's artistic interpretation. So, therefore, unquantifiable. It's his authorship of the original work rather than the simple recording of a physical event. Style never replacing good ideas any more than the technique is a substitute for content. The script, that's the content. And Stanley Kubrick's films had that mystery and beauty, which I consider the real art stuff, and were often greeted with reservation by critics, and only after a period of time did their status as something truly special emerge. He always said to me, don't give them what they want, give them what they don't know they want yet.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. And that's why his films were, it strikes me talking about his films that they were ahead of their time in many ways, but they're also timeless. I mean, they don't age.
No, absolutely not. That's why they're the ones that I suppose that in all my career, nobody ever goes back and says whatever else I might have done. It's always the Stanley Kubrick film, I did persona non grata.
Let me ask you some specific questions about a few of these films. Starting with Barry Lyndon, he pushes the envelope technologically in all of his films. In Barry Lyndon, it was obviously the vast lenses, shooting by candlelight. that must have been a painstaking process.
Yes, it was. I mean, technically, for people that probably don't know about these lenses, they weren't built for cinematography. They were stills lenses, you know? You know about all that, do you? There's an article I put, I think, in the American Cinematographer soon after it was released about this sort of stuff. So you probably read all that, have you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so you know they were adapted to fit a movie camera, and they were an Edigiulo cinema products. After these lenses were sold to Stanley, or he probably gave them to him, they were made for deep space photography. They worked on Hasselblads, and they were all prime 50mm lens, but they were 0.70. You know, that's quite fast. Most lenses are f2 or 1.4. This was 0.95, 0.70, so it's still 2 stops faster than most lenses ever produced, and still is. And Ed remounted the Julia, that is, to work on a blimp new construction cine camera, a sound camera. And that's what we did. We adapted them, we scaled them, and used them for those candlelight sequences. The depth of field, as you can imagine, was extremely shallow.
Yeah.
Literally, at 5 feet, you have probably half an inch of depth. And sometimes Ryan O'Neill couldn't move. We had to sort of clamp his head into a vice. And the camera used to move. We got quite adventurous with them in the end, because although they're all standard 50s, he then had various other compendium lenses made that would fit to the front of these 50s to give them another angle, like a 25 or 35 and a 70. So basically he had 4 of these 0.70 lenses now as a complete set. So that was the beauty of it. And going through all that was like 3 months of tests and scaling, and that's what I was involved with before we even turned a foot of film, you know? And I've often wondered since whether we could still use them to make another film. I think he was talking about using them on Eyes Wide Shut, but we never got round to it, you know.
Wow.
Yes, that was a challenge. And that was a long film, though. It was an 80. I mean, I was on it 18 months, I suppose. Principal shooting was probably about 12 months, frankly, with the shutdown. You heard about it shutting down, did you, in Ireland?
I did, yes.
Yeah, so we did 3 months there, and then we shut down. And I think he laid off most of the crew with the odd few. I was one, and the DP, John Alcott, Roy Walker, maybe Ken Adam. 5 or 6 people were retained, and first assistant director. And then we resumed work 3 months later in and around England, around the stately homes in England. Yeah.
You know, when you think about Kubrick's films, always the images kind of burn in your brain, and a lot of those images were captured in concert with John Alcott. Tell me about what you observed of their relationship.
Well, I think it was purely professional. I think it's like everything else. There was no, with Stanley, I mean, there's no social life. I always say, after with John, he was, John did clockwork with him, and and also he picked up the last sort of 2 years shooting of Space Odyssey 2001. So John was on the model unit for all that time. And he was on the principal photography as well, but as an assistant cameraman. So this is what Stanley does. He appreciates people's efforts and works and admiration. If he likes them and he feels they're completely 100% devoted to him, which you have to be, otherwise you're out. Devoted in a respectful sense, not just being some sort of sniveling, sycophantic yard dog who wants a job, and needs the credit, because you're there for a year. Most of the films take, 20, 30 weeks, maybe longer. So it's always a test. I always say the only way to get to know anybody is either marry them or do a picture with Stanley Kubrick, right? Then at the end of it, you know who's going to be asked back for the next. And John was very tolerant and very forgiving and thankful for the opportunity to work for him, because when you ask a DP a show for Stanley, it's high profile. It is. You put your name on the blocks. And, of course, he got the Oscar for Barry Lyndon, which his career never looked back after that,
Yeah. And it gives you... It affords you...
photograph work of art. It was much less more photographically enjoyable, I suppose, really in the sense than Full Metal, which again was digressed incredibly, a documentary type bio of Vietnam as it probably was, which most people say who were there would identify with more than any of the others. It's probably trying to say something that probably the apocalypse never did. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
When you read Dispatches and David Hare's Dispatches, or you read Short Timers by Gustav Laston, you'll see between those two books Full Metal. You know, those people went through it, one as a correspondent, one as a Viet Cong man. And so, you know, this is the research he does into stuff, you know, and that's it. So when you do Barry Lyndon, the whole Makepeace Thackeray thing, I found the book rather tedious, I'd put it down. And in fact, the film, in many ways, although a cinematic delight, was rather over length, wasn't it? I found it so anyway. But I suppose when you're involved with something for so long, it just all you live off is the memories of every shot or every scene you ever did with him. You know, it all comes back to you a year or two later.
Yeah.
And John went on to do, obviously, The Shining with him as well, which he didn't complete, and I finished the film off for him. So there you go. So I was very grateful for that. I was considered the number one or number two choice to him. You know, I think essentially he was a fine cameraman. Yeah,
and The Shining is fascinating photographically for the use of Steadicam, the most kind of prominent Steadicam at that time.
Yeah, it was. Yes.
What were the particular challenges that you found on that shoot?
Well, I didn't find any with the Steadicam because, I think Garrett Brown did. I think he was the inventor, professor who invented the machine, and it was completely inert in his hands. He just made it speak. Mm-hmm. His camera was just something fantastic to be with. And I was assistant, and everything was remote. The lenses were turned remote. You had a Milsome which controlled radio signals to the lens. It could do things. And we finally, the challenge with Garrett was having to do maybe 10, 12, 20 takes, running through 3 corridors and ending up on a close-up. 3 corridors meaning maybe 2 sets, with the kitchen out, the kitchen living room, the lounge into the main reception area. You do that in one take, and there wasn't a blip in the camera movement. There wasn't one. And with wide angles largely, where you could leave, the lens almost locked off at 10 feet, and it would all be sharp. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nothing like as challenging for me as Barry Lyndon. Nothing like it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, as always with him, it's being made to feel important to his creation. That was sharing the prize. The price is always 24/7. Eat, drink, and sleep it, and you're contracted to him, body and soul. You are. That's the way it is,
Yeah.
So it isn't good for home life, not good for marriages. It's hopeless for that sort of thing. And I think with Hawke films, you do sort of booking divorces, so we could all get. I didn't, but my wife luckily stood by me. But a lot of bad marriages came out of that picture. If you're married to him or me, my wife used to say.
Wow, they should have had a marriage counselor on. They should have had a marriage counselor on set. That should have been one of the. That would have been good. You know what, though? The shoot of The Shining lasted quite a while. Did Mr. Alcott have different obligations that he had to get to, and that's why you came on it the last 7 weeks, or what happened there?
Say again?
When you took over...
The shoot was a long while, but what?
When you took over for Mr. Alcott, why did that happen? Did he... Well,
I think I don't know. It wasn't he was removed. No, not at all. I think he had plans to... the film was, unquestionably, they go on longer than the scheduled time, built into a script and things like that. Not that we ever saw a script actually, but there we are. We knew that essentially John had been with him before and knew it would go on and on. I think that was his way of saying, "Well, I'll give you 20 weeks or whatever it was, and I've got to leave to do something else." And when it came to 20 weeks, he did. So we still had 7 to go, which I finished. But he didn't come back for any more. I think it's a life. It is a life. It's like with Ken Adam. Ken did Strange Love as a designer. I think, and then came back and did Barry Lyndon. I think, I suppose in a way, I was one of the few that did more than 3 films with him, 3.5 films with him, you know?
Yeah.
But when it came to, I think, Eyes Wide Shut, I had reasons for not coming on board, and my wife wasn't well. She was unwell, and we were living in the place at the time. And I just thought it would be another year, and it's going to be a drain on our, not just the nervous system, a privilege, what it always is, but I wasn't sure that after a long layoff, which he'd had, it would be more demanding than the others. You know what I'm saying? On me personally, my private life and everything else, and I don't think I was prepared to that. Although, you know, again, in hindsight, I wish I had have done it. I really do. So there you go.
But when you started developing Full Metal Jacket, tell me the conversations that you two shared about the visual scheme of it.
Well, we two shared. He had a vision, and we went ahead and tested every possible way of approaching it. Whether it was, first of all, was going to be like The Longest Day in 65mm black and white, which I was thrilled about. And then it thought it might be more, sort of 16mm, more docudrama type deal and things like that. So we discussed all that, did tests with 16, 65. He bought 2 65mm cameras. He buys all his equipment, which I test thoroughly. Everything that he buys, I test. And so he had an arsenal of cameras, probably 6, 7 cameras, plus several 70 or 80 different lenses as well. Okay, so it was quite a bit of equipment, really, his own. And then we discussed maybe, well, if we're going to go 35, let's make it look like it was shot on 8mm or something small. And in other words, desaturate it as much as possible, take out whatever color there is, because you've got to make Vietnam, although it was set in Southeast Asia, it was actually shot in Southeast London, all of it. All right?
Yeah,
so
that's amazing.
What it was, you bring in things, elements, and the elements were largely the existing city structures of Wade, Tet, and all the rest of it, which were bombed out and blitzed urban warfare, which is what it was. But what it was, as you know, it was a gas factory or gas power station, if you like, which was going to be demolished. So a lot of stuff was actually gelignite and pulled down by military to reduce it to rubble for us. So they did it, and we shot it. So we had already a bombed-out city completely built for us, and all we did was put several hundred palm trees here and there and skips and place them to taste in most of the compositions, and set lights to them, that sort of thing. So that was another aspect. We tested that, and and then we thought, well, let's keep it like dull. You can't. The heat isn't affecting gas works. It is in Vietnam. You've got to make this place feel like they're dying. It's heat, unimaginable. Humidity and one thing and another. But that was the only difficult thing to do, to keep the cold breath, because they were frozen some of the time in, jackets and things like that, bare shoulders, and it was cold. It was just winter. The whole thing went through summer to winter. So, again, testing stuff, which was shooting again, either first light or last light. Or if we had to shoot during the day, the weather had to be pretty grey and overcast. So you could, the sultriness of it, and obviously. Yeah. So to shoot wide open meant, stacking a lot of NDs on the lenses to reduce the exposure through the lens. So it flattened it out a lot. So if you had a daylight exposure, I don't know, at 16:22, we still shoot at f1.4. So we put NDs all up front, take the correction filter off so it went kind of cold, and kept everything wide open. So even on the wide-angle lenses, it still looked shallow, and you were shooting full aperture, so you got the maximum effect from all the fire, the gun bullets, shells, firecrackers. Anything that was going off looked completely real. You saw, you weren't pulling that in. You weren't underexposing it. You were overexposing everything, even though you had a bright, full-lit day. So again, that was more testing. So all this stuff, this is what you talk about before it goes. So when you're into it, you get on with it. You get the lenses. He wanted to shoot with Nikons. So he bought every Nikon stills lens. We had those adapted to fit a Freeze NC camera, all remounted Nikon. Mounts on the camera. I think the lens arsenal then was something over 100 different 100 different lenses, and wild cameras and this, that, and the other. And again, I was operating and lighting the show for him, and so there's very few people involved, really, in even a film the size of Full Metal Jacket. We never had a huge crew. There was myself, obviously a full crew, an assistant cameraman, grips, 2 electricians or something like that, and that's how we carried on the way we did. The sets were built pre-lit already, so we went straight in and just pulled a switch on memories, dimmed them to the exposure we predetermined at the levels we wanted to shoot at, and bang, off we went and shot it. That's it. So it was really, really prepared, and technically in that sense. That gave him all the time in the world to work with actors and get the performances he needed. And I think Matthew Modine did an amazing job. I mean, I used to say to him after several months of shooting, whatever you're on, Stanley, can you get me some? Because you never seem to want to sleep. He only averaged, 5 hours sleep a night. He was never caught off guard and never vulnerable. I mean, the camera setup was always with 1 inch off its mark. Now, who would notice that? He did. Always framing the composition essential to his trained eye. It was phenomenal,
Yeah.
Okay.
I could.
You got all that, did you? So, I mean, did that answer your question? I don't know.
No, it absolutely did.
There's an answer in there somewhere. Yeah? Well, I can never be specific and answer these questions in one line. You have to give a whole series of things, because you learn more from one film. You go back and do another, you learn more about him. And you do 3 with him, you learn even more about him personally.
Yeah.
And probably, you may have adopted the role of a family member, or you might have been his a new son, that sort of, you know what I'm saying?
No, I understand completely.
I felt that connection to him. It got very close.
Well, there was I wanted to ask you about one particular scene in Full Metal Jacket, and forgive me because my knowledge of photography, it's not very vast, but there's a scene where the female, the Vietnamese gunman, assassin at the end, the flames, and there's a sort of ghosting. Was that a special photographic effect?
Do you know, I wanted to. We wanted more crazy, because when you find the girl, you find, oh my God, this, to make this kid look crazy or what. But she's 13 years old. She's wiped out a whole platoon, and when you go into this place, it's on fire because they put about 1 million rounds into it, but they haven't shot her. But so we had an idea that because if you use the old-fashioned cameras, the ones that are non-reflex cameras, that is, you can muck around with the shutter, and you can put the movement out of sync. So what you're doing, really, you're photographing the frame already ahead of the principal frame you're putting, and also the tail end of the other frame beneath it, which is going through. So you're getting flames coming off one frame and into another. So it's surrounding the one principal frame. Then later on, when you print it out, you have fire creeping in from all aspects of the format. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. They did a lot on Ryan. What's the one? Calling Private Ryan? The one that
Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, because the DP rang me and said, "How did you do that?" And they shot a lot of landings on the beaches with old cameras that they could throw them out of sync. So you're recording one frame, another frame into the one. So the camera was running partially out of sync. You know what I'm saying?
Wow, yes, yeah.
You just alter the movement to grab one perf of the frame in front and one perf of the frame that's already gone through and amalgamate them into the one. And you had all these sort of blurred, it's not a blurred effect. It's just a very, very exciting look for confusion. And I think that's when she gets shot, that's
right.
The effect that came through, and I think it worked. We wondered if it might have been a mistake to do that, but in fact, it looked quite interesting.
Oh, it's incredible.
And he attached himself in it. It's interesting. If you come out of a movie, a Kubrick movie, saying how do they do that, or that's interesting, that will always stay in the movie. That won't hit the floor, you know.
Mm-hmm. Tell me what
the cutting room floor, that is.
Tell me what you miss most about him.
Well, I think that his untimely demise left a loving wife and family. But what it did, it also sort of shattered the lives of all who really knew him, And I still consider myself somebody that knew him. That really, I got the word really underlined because not people really knew him. So I'm still trying to come to terms. He's no longer with us. As far as I'm concerned, there will never, ever be another Stanley Kubrick, and I think that's true in my lifetime anyway.
Yeah. I always appreciated his films, but since I started this series and been speaking to 50 or so of his collaborators, I've grown such a deeper appreciation of what he meant to cinema. I mean, and people talk about how few films he made, but these films will last forever, as long as there are movies.
Except I don't know about Eyes Wide Shut. I mean, I don't know if he could live with that one. I don't think. I don't know. Unofficially, I don't know why he died, frankly. But there we are. I always felt he was indestructible. It was others that were vulnerable, not him.
That's true.
So yes, I'm not sure that will outlive the legacy of his work, or certainly. But I still come to terms with it. As I say, sometimes, a lot of these films, until their status as something truly special emerge, often years and years and years later. When I went to, if I can digress a little, I was asked was it last year? The BFI were putting on a copy of Barry Lyndon at the British Film Institute, and I went up there to just introduce it because I was one of the few living members that was on the crew and still alive, because that was over 30. I think it's its 30th anniversary, so it's 32 years now, 33 years ago. And afterwards, and I sat at the back, and it was 3 hours plus and everything else. And because I remember reading all these reviews that it was the biggest antidote for insomnia since Benzedrine.
Right.
About the worst thing I could ever read about the critics saying stuff. This was then, 30 years earlier. So at the end of it, I find anybody feel this. And half the audience, although there were only, 300 people, half the audience put their hands up to say they hadn't seen it before and enjoyed it very much for the first time. And the other half said they enjoyed it much more the second time. This is 30 years later,
Yeah.
So as often we think there's faults and things, a lot of things he does, he is ahead of the game, isn't he? He is.
Very much.
And why you choose a film like Barry, you just don't know, do you? Because it's a tough book to read. I mean, Makepeace Thackeray took 10 years to write it. We left it and came back to it years later to finish it. And I always had that feeling that's what we were doing on Barry Lyndon. We didn't know how to finish it, where the film was going. What was it going to do for him? It helped us in the camera side of things. It was fascinating. But it's kind of an exercise, really, and how to work go back to school and learn something different,
Yeah.
And get paid at the same time.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, because a lot of his movies were met with criticism upon their release, and then it wasn't until years later that they were finally appreciated as they should have been.
That's right. Truly special emerged, isn't it? Something from them,
yeah, absolutely. Did you have any kind of conversations with him concerning Napoleon? Because I think it was around...
Well, I mean, that was when I met him at the end of Eyes Wide Shut. He didn't look very healthy. I must say, he looked like he lost quite a bit of weight. I hadn't seen him for about a year or more. And he mentioned that to me then. He wants me back. We must do the next. He wanted me to do the next. And I felt that he was prepared to go with something. I'm not sure what it was, because there was lots of things, I think. It was dealing mainly, when you say Napoleon, it's a broad canvas, and I'm not sure.
I think that was pre-Barry Lyndon he was looking.
He did, yes, he did. Yeah. He's had that for some time, and you go to these archives, which are in London. You ever get a chance to visit them? They're at the Elephant and Castle, the Kubrick archives, there.
Yeah.
At the Academy somewhere. If you want details, I'll get them for you if ever you're over here.
I've heard people. I've spoken to people that have investigated those archives. Just a treasure trove.
Yeah, it's interesting. They're always there. I haven't been. There we are. You see, because I live on the Welsh border, way outside. But I'm going to get over there and have a look and see. But I think that's a collection of stuff which he's had on the cards for some time, apparently. I mean, he was also involved very much, but there's a long gap between sort of Full Metal Jacket and Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah.
During those 14 years, he did a lot of research on a lot of stuff. I mean, not least AI, which I think at one time he was going to do, but and then when it came out, he thought, well, that was that. It couldn't be bettered the way Steven Spielberg shot it. But there were so many things. He wanted to go out on a big show, a high,
Yeah.
And that's why I think, in a way, he was disappointed with Eyes Wide Shut. I don't know what you felt about it. What did you feel about Eyes Wide Shut?
I love all of his movies, and I love Eyes Wide Shut, and I think Eyes Wide Shut is a film that has deepened in meaning for me over the years too.
Is it?
Yeah, and I feel that the conversation is coming back to Eyes Wide Shut in general among movie fans. They're grappling with it again. Which you need to do with a Kubrick film. I mean, you're not going to get the answers on first viewing. It doesn't tell you how you're supposed to feel like other movies do,
But how many people go and see so many films again that other directors have shot? Very few. You can put him amongst those that it did. His work did.
Well, before I let you go, I actually wanted to ask about another of your projects that people definitely go back and watch over and over again, and that's Lonesome Dove. You shot.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yes. Did you like that?
Oh, it's classic. I was speaking to Robert Duvall, and we were talking on and on about
your namesake.
Lonesome Dove. Absolutely.
Your namesake.
Absolutely. Yeah. That must have been a special project.
Oh, that was fantastic too. I mean, I must admit it was. But unfortunately, I live in England. I don't think anybody's ever seen it all. It might have been shown here but not over 8 hours, which it ran. I think it ran like 8 hours or something stupid. 10-hour miniseries, of which I think 1 hour 40 of interruptions, commercials, and one thing, and made it 8 hours something. So I don't think anybody's ever seen it all. In America, they have. I say it was viewed there. You often wondered sometimes whether it could be made into a feature. Well, what would you lose, and where would you lose it? You can't, can you really? So it fell short of not being viewed, I think, here, really. So very few people in this country had heard of it. But McMurtry's book was amazing, wasn't it? I mean, I read the book, and which was several hundred pages thick, and you grip from cover to cover. And I don't know how Bill Whitliff did such an amazing job condensing it all into a 300-400-page script, which was, I thought, enlightening stuff. And everybody wanted to be in it, so they got a fantastic cast, didn't they? They really did.
They really did.
I enjoyed immensely working on that, every day of it. I did, honestly, because I'd never done a Western, so I didn't know how it would approach. And Simon Windsor had done stuff in Australia, one thing or another. Between the Australian ideas, my ideas, we kicked into something really quite unusual to see too. I thought quite different,
Yeah.
Together with Dean Semler's second unit direction, I was very lucky to have Dean. So all in all, yes, again, that's something. But it's not like a masterpiece because it's not a feature. I mean, although it got many Emmy nominations, it would have got Oscars if it had been a film. You know what I'm saying?
I think so too, but
and remembered more for something. I don't know.
I think at the same time it's very much cherished in this country, and I think that the fact that it plays as a miniseries, I mean, it feels like a great novel as a film. So I don't know what it would lose at feature length. As a miniseries, it keeps that kind of great novel feeling to it.
Yes, it does. It does, but. I don't know. Maybe it should be a short. I directed the second because I was asked to do the second one, which I don't think. They didn't want. I don't think it was anything like the script. It was rewritten by somebody. It wasn't McMurtry. And this is the thing about McMurtry. Every day, everybody in the cast, all of them, when we were doing the original, had a copy of the book with them. It was like the gospel, according to McMurtry. So all they really wanted from us was where to stand, where to look, and they knew the rest. They knew the rest well. When it came to the remake, I mean, John Boyd did a fantastic job, but he wasn't Gus. He wasn't Tom.
Right.
Tom. Tommy Lee Jones. It's just you just had those characters emblazoned in your brain. You can omit them, you know.
Absolutely.
And everybody. I mean, with Ricky or Angelica Houston, all the rest. Danny Glover. You know, unless you get the same cast back, it somehow would have lent itself to something more. So I lectured just to photograph the second unit, which I did for 70 days, but it came nowhere in as a collection of anything close to the original. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So they're one-offs, aren't they, really? But I suppose in a way I'd love it to have been if we could have poured out maybe 2.5 hours into a feature, I think it would still have cleaned up as a piece of, you know, as a film.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. You lose a lot, but again, it might have gathered, you know. I'd love an Oscar. I've never won an Oscar. And I thought, my age, I would love to have gone out in a blaze of glory or something. You know.
Well, you've done
mucking about doing stuff for television, slasher, sure, trying to make really bad scripts, which nobody seems better write good scripts these days, look rather photographically good. And it's really a waste of time because they never wind up in the theatre anyway, though they claim to be theatrical releases. They get bought, pre-sold, and you find them in Blockbusters somewhere, you know, about a year later. And that way, your work's never appreciated by your peers because they're not viewed on the big screen, you know?
Yeah. Well, and
so you don't get the big prizes.
Well, does working for a Kubrick, does that kind of spoil you in a way?
Yeah, I think it does. I'm very bitter now about the way things are, you know, with the business, really. I am.
It's vastly different.
It is. I think it is. I mean, I don't know, guys coming out of film school now, you know, they fool around with this sort of high-def SLR cameras and call themselves cinematographers. It's like you and I having a laptop and calling ourselves an author, you know? Mm-hmm. And the stuff never comes out looking fantastic anyway.
Yeah.
CGI, world of CGI now, it's all in the control largely, our work, I think, of the telecine, you know? And that's what they spend money on nowadays. Resurrecting bad photography or medium photography to make it look something different in the final form, in the final tech, because that's the show now. It's all done in post, isn't it? Most of the stuff now is done in post.
Yeah, it is different.
So anyway, so yes, I am. I'm waiting for the big one.